Welcome to the I Create Daily podcast. I'm LeAura Alderson.
And I'm Devani Alderson. We're your co-hosts on this journey of creativity and productivity.
I Create Daily is for artists in every genre of creating, from musicians to writers, crafters to inventors, bloggers to entrepreneurs. I Create Daily is a movement for creators serious about your art.
If you're into creating anything, this podcast is definitely for you. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Hello and welcome to another episode of the I Create Daily podcast, a movement for creators serious about their art. And today we're doing a coffee break on reverse engineering your goals. Our previous coffee break was on identifying goals. So if you haven't seen that, you might want to check it out and it'll be linked in the show notes. But today we're going to talk about reverse engineering goals.
And you are?
I am Devani.
And I'm LeAura Alderson. And yes, so we've all planned trips before. So you plan a vacation, and let's say that you're planning a spring vacation or even a winter vacation, and you start out ahead of time deciding where you're going to go, then researching the destination, researching the prices, researching the airfare, where you're going to stay, what you're going to do when you're there, what kind of clothing you're going to wear, and all of that, right? Planning on being off, planning on what you need to do at home during that time or have done at home for you during the time when you're gone, planning your absence. You plan your workload accordingly as well, usually especially the last few days. So planning, what's really fascinating and in a way, I know it's sad, unfortunate that it's not prioritized in school, that the education system today, at least when I was going to school, when you were in school, we did not focus on teaching people how to set goals.
The only time that it was really talked about was around testing.
Yeah. And then it was related specifically to the test, but how to set life goals, beginning with where you are and what you want to achieve this week, this day, this year is just not a subject that's taught. And yet it's really critical to any achievement. Yeah. So that's why, while we started as a brand and podcast by creators for creators who are serious about monetizing their art in the world, and so that they can do what they love most, you can do what you love most of the time for a living, so that it can support you and your family. What we've realized is one of the biggest components missing from our lives in the past, as well as most people's lives and creators, is not setting goals, not setting realistic goals.
And even how to set goals and what to set, like you were saying, you can talk about goal setting, but then you're like, okay, well, my goal is to be an independent artist. Yeah. Well, that's a really big goal that you can't necessarily, you have to chunk all that down.
Right, exactly. So, so is saying, I want to go to Costa Rica.
Yeah.
That's big. Let's say that you've never been out of the country before and you don't have a passport. And, so it's like that's, a big chunk at first, but it's totally doable one step at a time. And we've all planned trips, even if it was just a weekend to the beach kind of thing. And so it's like what's baffling is that we forget how important it is to set goals each day in order to get where we want to go. Mm-hmm. And so, so again, like if we were driving cross country, and I've used this before, and it's such a good depiction of the journey. And that is that, let's say that we are heading from North Carolina, East Coast to California, San Francisco, West Coast. And what we know is we're going to head west. We're going to probably start out on I-40 from where we are, and we are probably going to be driving about 8 to 10 hours a day, mm-hmm. which will put us approximately in, we can estimate approximate states and all that. And yet, since in this case, for us, let's say if we were planning this, the journey might also be about enjoying the scenery along the way. It might
visiting other artists that we meet along the way.
Absolutely, other
showcasing other creative places and shops we see, and
seeing the sights of each state, so that we remember that hey, we were in this state and this is what that was about. And so
you create a trip around the journey,
right? And we would exactly
it's like in life, like in our life goals, all the people we've interviewed, they've really talked about the importance of their journey and how that was the biggest thing towards their goal was the journey they took to get there.
Right, exactly. And so in that scenario, not unlike, again, whether it's going to a driving trip to the West Coast or a flying trip to out of country, the bottom line is, approximately what you want to do, but all the details along the way, you can approximately plan, and then they become more clear as you go. But so one of the things, like if you know you're going to the West Coast, then you don't start out saying, I want to drive to Hawaii. That's even further. You start out saying driving to the West Coast. If you did want to go to Hawaii, so let's say that might be the goal of, I want to earn $1 million by the end of the year. Well, that may or may not be doable, but in order to achieve it, you need to reverse engineer it and say, is it doable, and what would it require to do that?
Well, I remember that was one of the earliest things I learned when it came to money and finance through the Rich Dad books, was this like, well, before you can get rich, you kind of have to figure out what is the baseline income that you need to live on from month to month, and even week to week or day to day. Like how much money do you need to earn so that you can then work towards, being the millionaire, or being having passive income, or whatever the goal is financially for anybody. It's sort of like, well, what's the baseline? And for any goal that we set, whether it's become an artist, or whether it's create an Etsy shop that monetizes, or grow an Instagram following so that you can leverage that later on down the road, whatever it is, you have to have that big goal, but then you have to decide what baseline goals, like every quarter, do I need to achieve to reach that bigger goal? Yeah,
exactly. And can you make a note? You've got the keyboard over there for the notes, because that reminds me, we want to talk about passive income as well. In a bit, if we have time on this one before we go. So yeah, it's like the concept of the journey is, so let's say that, back to the finance thing, you're going to need to know, okay, how much will I need approximately, based on the big chunk, expenditures for the trip, the hotel, food, and airfare being the largest typically. And then, what are the other incidentals? And so it's the same thing for your business journey as it would be for your vacation planning. It's just that, again, so many people spend more time planning their vacation than their life. And part of that is when you're working for someone else, when you have a job and you clock in and out, or you're on salary, but you have a place that you're supposed to show up to and report to, and jobs assigned, or jobs that you're supposed to create to do.
Or if you're a virtual worker.
Yeah, exactly. Then it's sort of like that job becomes your framework. When you're a creative artist entrepreneur and you're working on your own, and then you're responsible for creating that structure, and setting goals becomes the structure that you show up to each day. Yeah. It reminds me of the interview we did the other day with Ingrid Sanchez. She's a watercolor artist, beautiful young lady, beautiful art. And her two things that we love that she said were the most important that began her journey to success. And it's been a 3-year journey. And in her 3rd year, she was finally monetizing to be self-sufficient. Yeah. And that was showing up daily, doing art daily. So showing up to do art daily, and the discipline of getting up early and getting it done. She treated it like a job.
Yeah, she treated it like we often talk about how, we want to escape the 9 to 5, but the structure of a 9 to 5 is what keeps a lot of businesses running. Yeah.
Right.
What I mean? It's not razzing 9 to 5. It's razzing sort of the culture around people showing up doing stuff they don't like doing.
Yeah.
And not saying you have to work 9 to 5 and it has to be restricted to that when you work for yourself, because generally it's not. It's generally like 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. So it's kind of reversed for a while. Yeah. But
especially if it's a side gig.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But it's the concept is you show up to yourself because that's now your job.
Yeah, showing up and doing your work. And we've written an article, which we'll link here as well. And it's I think the article is titled something like No Excuses. And it's the concept that many of us treat our friends and family better than we do ourselves relative to respecting our time, their time. Like if we have an appointment then with them or a commitment, we typically show up. And if we miss it, we feel bad, or we apologize, but we show up. And so committing to ourselves, if you want your creative endeavor to become your livelihood, then you need to show up for yourself, and not make excuses to yourself either, because we will always find people, family, friends, what have you, online, who will pat us on the back, essentially virtually, and say that's okay that you didn't get that done because I know you're tired. I know you're working too hard after all. But remember, it's sort of like, it's sort of like feeling like you need to lose weight, and then your best buddy or whatever loses weight and is excited about it, and you're like, you're happy for her or him, but at the same time, it kind of
eat a donut and be quiet.
Exactly. It makes you feel bad because it reminds you of what you didn't do. Yeah. Similarly, so in a way, you want to kind of hang out with people like that.
Yeah, I love what Gary Vaynerchuk says about that. He says it like kind of briskly, but he's like, the only people who accept your excuses are your other loser friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, and it's true. Yeah. Like, people who are happy with their lives and doing cool things they don't want you to feel like that about yourself. They don't want you to be mediocre when they know that you have other dreams and goals. Right.
And that's right. And the thing that we can probably all relate to is at the times in our life where we have felt the most proud inside out of our accomplishments, the greatest sense of self and achievement has not come from doing less, but has come from doing more than even we thought we were capable of. So, and we talk about this a lot on our site. We talk about it a lot in articles because it's such a pivotal and critical concept, mindset to grasp and to implement. And one of the things, like when I first hired a personal trainer years ago to help me resolve chronic back pain and reverse osteopenia, she had me doing things I had never been to a gym. I belonged to a gym before. I'd never done weight kind of circuits before. And so it was all new. And she would hand me these huge weights. And I looked at her and laughed like, you got to be kidding, thinking she was, but she wasn't. She was serious. And lo and behold, I was actually able to do it. And I made progress more quickly.
And she was a fantastic trainer because she didn't accept no for an answer. And she knew what you could do. Like, we all need somebody in our corner who knows that we can do more than sometimes we think we can do.
That's right. And that trainer, by the way, was Jill Coleman, who's a fantastic woman and entrepreneur and coach and fitness instructor. And I remember one time I told her something like, I said this a couple different times, a couple different ways. It's like at the time I said, I'm 48, right? And like, she was like, I don't know, 26 at the time. And she's like, yeah. It's like, and then
your point.
Yeah, exactly. And another time I said, I could actually be your mother as far as my age. And she was like, okay. That was like
I literally don't care. So, just do your next set.
Exactly.
That's very cute.
Exactly. So, and I really appreciate that she, because she knew that we're all capable of more than we think. And when we push ourselves, it's when we please ourselves in the end. Sure, there's always a time for a day spa, a massage, a cup of chai, whatever, tea, coffee, treat. Always. It's just that needs to be the exception, not the rule. That needs to be less than the 80%. And then the 80% is pushing ourselves, because that's how we grow.
Well, one thing that I love is when Tom Bilyeu asked LeVar of Impact Theory, asked LeVar Burton of Reading Rainbow and Star Trek and everything else we love. Yeah. Anyway, he asked him, like, where do you put pushing yourself and striving and doing better and having extraordinary work ethic with self-love? And Tim Burton basically said, did I say Tim Burton? LeVar Burton. Yeah. LeVar Burton, sorry. Said,
good catch.
I don't see striving for more and working really hard as different from self-love. And I thought that was really, really powerful, because pushing yourself is like the ultimate pat on your own back. You're like, I got this. I know I can do this. And you end up feeling so much happier, even if it's a struggle, even if it's like grunt work, you know, you just feel better.
Yeah. And we write about this a lot because it's so critical and so important. Mindset really is the foundation for everything else we do. And, it's, I was listening to a podcast with EO Fire and Johnny Dumas, and I forget his guest name at the moment yesterday, but they were just talking about the concept of, John was saying that one of the practices that he has implemented is to smile. Actually, sorry, this was Mike Dillard. Yeah, it was Mike Dillard. It was to smile as he was going to sleep and smile when he was waking, when he woke up first thing, because it's like proven that when you smile, then it automatically elevates. It signals. It makes sense. It's like if you're walking down the street and someone smiles at you, the natural response is to smile back. And in that exchange, there's light and lightness, and you're lifted up, and they're lifted up. And same thing when we smile for ourselves and to ourselves.
We need more random acts of smiles.
That's right. And John was talking about EO relative to how your voice changes. Like when you're smiling, people can hear the smile in your voice. Exactly. Yeah. And so part of that thing with the mindset and the resetting, your attitude and your fortitude and your abilities is to just assume that you can do more than you think. You can push harder than you think. And when you're tired, that's when you stand up straight, sit up straight, whatever it is you're doing, put your shoulders back, take a deep breath, and just, or even better, get up and jump up and walk briskly.
And having a roadmap for your goals really helps with that, because in those down moments, you can look at your list of goals. You can find the quickest, simplest thing to do in the moment and get a quick win under your belt. Yeah. I know that that's helped me so much when I feel down, or it's like an unproductive day, or things go wrong. Just looking at like, what do I need to get done? Yeah. What's one thing I can do? I get that done, and I'm like, oh, okay, I feel better. I can move forward.
I'm glad you brought that back around to goals, because we need to end soon, and we need to make sure that's because that's really the main point of what we wanted to convey today, is that if you set goals and work on them daily, you will achieve them. And so you work, and even if, like in the journey, we need to tweak them, that's totally fine, and that's normal. In fact, that's more normal than not. Mm-hmm. So set the goals, identify what you want to get done by the end of the year, and then break it down into quarters. And then from there, you break the quarters down into weeks, into months, and then into weeks, and the weeks into days. And, if that sounds too complicated at first, then start with the week and work your way into the day, and say, and if that's too complicated because you're just getting started in the journey of goal setting, then start with the day and say, by the end of today, when my head hits the pillow, I will feel good if I have done blank, if I have achieved blank. And so then, then the more we do that each day, the easier it gets to do that for each week, and say, by the end of this week, I know that I should be able to complete XYZ. And in order to do that, I'm just going to break down what I need to do each day to make that happen. So be sure to set your goals. We'd love to hear from you, creators at icreatedaily.com. Send us your questions. We respond to every email, and we'd love to hear about your journey and your successes.
Own your day. That's how you win daily.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
I Create Daily. Oh, and you can get these in our shop. I Create Daily mugs, apparel, wall art, shirts, hoodies, etc. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks so much for joining us for the I Create Daily podcast. Please let us know what creatives you would like us to interview and what topics you would be interested in hearing more about.
And if you enjoyed this show, please leave a review on iTunes. We value your feedback. We read all the reviews, and it just helps us get the word out on the I Create Daily podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.